This week on Shift Points, we get the center section back in the 55 truck, and it's got Posi traction now. Thanks for joining. Parking outside, and there was a ton of He started this project. Found a piece of brass he's going to take. Alright everyone. Alright guys, we are back working on Dad's 55 Chevrolet truck. We are going to do our very best to get this PosiTrack unit into the truck this week. So last week you guys saw us get this thing fully disassembled and get everything ready. And then we run into a couple roadblocks. One being some bolts. Well, actually two things, being both of them being bolts. Bolt related. Got us was these bolts here that were in holding on the ring gear. They were too short to run in this PosiTrack unit, so that was the first thing. Then we looked at it, just looked at the heads, not really thinking, not completely paying attention. Look at the heads. Head is a 3/4 head, and that usually means a 1/2 inch bolt. But because of what we're dealing with here, it is a 7/16 bolt. So with this 4-9 inch, it has a 3/4 inch head on the bolt and a 7/16 shank on the bolt. So that was what got us first. So we went and got 1/2 inch bolts, but we actually needed 7/16. So that threw us, that put the first roadblock. Second roadblock is if you take a 7/16 bolt in this PosiTraction unit and you put it in here, you could see
clearance for 1/2 inch.
It's clearance for 1/2 inch, and there is a ton of play between the shank of the bolt and the hole here in the PosiTrack unit. So that is not great, because if you have that much play and all these bolts around here, that will allow this ring gear to shift. Whenever you go to put this thing on, you bolt it up to it. If you don't get this just right, that thing will, if you don't get everything exactly, I mean, it had to be perfect basically for that to set right where it needs to. And you cannot have any play on that ring gear and the pinion. If you do that, something is going to break. I don't know what would break first, but something in there would let go at some point, especially if we're there taking it down the drag strip. You're going to put a lot of pressure on it, and we've done all this work to try and make this thing bulletproof. And if we do that, and the first thing we do is the ring gear shifts on this, gets everything out of time, and just absolutely destroys the rear end. So, I mentioned at the end of the last video that on the box here, on the Yukon box, it actually says TL bolt required. TL stands for track lock, meaning this unit requires special bolts. Of course it does. East Coast Gear Supply. East Coast Gear Supply. They're down on the East Coast, down toward the east of North Carolina. Louisville, North Carolina. And they didn't have any of the bolts, but they had sleeves. And these sleeves actually go in, there you go. So here is one of the sleeves themselves. So instead of having to have the bolts, you could buy these sleeves and press these sleeves into the PosiTrack unit. So you can see that's where it would be. And you can actually see we've got one in already. So that takes up that difference in that bolt. So you can see here, we've got this. And when we put the bolt in here, it's actually extremely tight. So we have solved the problem because we don't have the play anymore, but actually these are a little too tight whenever you press these in. So what Dad is planning to do, he's going to take these and he's going to just put them in the lathe and turn them down just a little bit. There's about 4/1000ths of a press on these. So you're going to turn these down just a little so it's not so tight, so that we can do this. Now you're asking, well Jake, you said the bolts were too short. Well, because of that, we were able to get regular 7/16 bolts that are 1.25 inch long. So these are grade 8 1.25 inch 7/16 bolts. Those will go into these sleeves, and they'll do what they're supposed to do. And the other good thing is because these regular bolts have a smaller head, it's going to make getting a socket down in this PosiTrack unit way better. So that was a lot to say to tell you that we think right now we are ready to start reassembling this. It's amazing what you run into here sometimes, guys. I know this isn't this is not regular TV here, right? With us, we try and tell you guys the truth, and this has been a little bit of a headache and a little bit more than what we expected. We thought we were just gonna be able to break this thing down, put it right back together. That has so far not been the case. All right, so Dad's planning to get these turned down. He's not actually gonna turn them down. He's gonna use, because he needs to take such a little bit off, he's got some general purpose emery cloth here. And he's got a bolt that he has center drilled the end of it. He's got a live center here in the back of the tailstock. And he can turn on the lathe here. That's gonna sit there and let this bolt turn and let those turn. He's got that, you just saw him tighten that nut down. So these are clamped all together. These do, some of them have a little bit of a chamfer. You can see like that one, but you can also see that other ones don't have hardly anything. So he's gonna turn these down and then probably give them all a little better chamfer to help get and feeding them into the Posi track a lot easier. So that's the plan here. I said earlier that there was about a 4,000 difference in the sleeves versus the hole in the Posi traction. It's actually about 7,000, so he has to take a little bit more off than he kind of than we initially said there. He probably needs to take probably about 4 thousandths off, give about a 3 thousandths press, something like that. So that's what he's working on. Alright, now that we've got the chamfer on all of them, we went ahead and dipped the end of this in just a little bit of grease, just to give it a little extra help. And so now Dad can go ahead and get this thing hammered down in place.
Off the outside.
Took a little bit of the plating off again.
Yep, it did.
So if you were wondering when we put the other two in, kind of how we did it before we did all this, that was just, I mean, we literally just pressed them in, but you could actually see some of the plating come off and kind of be laying around the edge, which is why we decided to take a little bit of the it off in the lathe. So,
but it still pulled.
But it still took some of it off, yeah.
And that's taking 4 thousandths off of it.
Mm-hmm. We're going just under flush on these. Alright, we got 8 more to go. Alright, got all the bolts started here into the ring gear. Dad uses his red Permatex thread locker on those bolts. And then I'm gonna take it and set it over here in. Who said filming YouTube videos isn't dangerous? I just got tripped on the tripod. Oh. So Dad's looked up the torque spec on these things. They need 60 foot-pounds on them. He's going to go to 35 initially, and then go crisscrossing the pattern, and then go down to, or go up to 60 foot-pounds afterwards. Why are you doing this with it in the press? Because he still has
rotating.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Simple as that. Gotcha.
I can't hold it with my hand.
Right. Well, it's fair. Alright, Dad got the other bearings put in place on this, so this is all ready to go back together. He's got the case up here in the vise. Again, really the most good thing about a Ford 9-inch. Just a reminder. And he went ahead, so he's got some shims in here that were already in here in place. He took some grease and just put a light coat of grease on that and hold those shims in place so we can set the pinion up in there and not knock those shims out. So kind of a little trick there. So we have this thing back together, and what Dad is doing right now is setting the backlash here. And he does that with these caps, these threaded caps on the end here. This allows for left and right adjustment for the engagement of the ring gear into the pinion. So we have to get that, according to our setup book over there, 10 to 16 thousandths is what we're trying to, is what the range that we're trying to hit here. And basically you can see when he takes his hand and he moves the ring gear like that, you can see there's just a little bit of motion basically before the two teeth between the ring gear and the pinion engage. There's a little bit of motion there, and you want that to be between 10 and 16 thousandths. You can see our dial indicator here has thousandths of an inch increments, and he's just hit it here at 11. Looks like to me.
So about 13.
13. Okay, I couldn't read it from my
14,
angle.
15, 13.
Gotcha. So there's hitting about 13, which I'd say is exactly what he's wanting out of this.
Pretty close. It's centered on the street car. You try to center that lash, or I try to center that lash.
Just trying to center it on that measurement, the 10,
Yeah, between
10 to 16.
You close to 13.
Gotcha.
I'd rather have it. Would have the tick loose, but centered is fine.
Good. Okay. Now that the backlash has been set, Dad is putting some pattern compound on the ring gear here, and that's going to allow him to visually see the engagement between the teeth on the ring gear and the teeth on the pinion, and make sure that they're where he wants them to be. So he's going to
Houston, we have a problem.
yeah, we do. So you can see here, something is hitting. I wonder if the heads of the bolts are getting into something.
Wouldn't surprise me if this being so much thicker. Wouldn't surprise me if something ain't.
It's weird that it runs that whole distance and then hits one like hard spot. Isn't that weird? Well, we definitely have something odd going on here. Alright, if you guys were wondering kind of what delicate creatures a rear end is, you saw that thing clunking and hitting. It was hitting so, like, aggressively.
Solid.
So solidly aggressive. We were certain that something was getting into the case. Dad just happened to look in there. We had a flashlight looking, and we can see it right here. It might be better without the flashlight, Daddy. Right, you see that little dot right there on the end of that stick there? One little dot. That was on the pinion. And that being on the pinion caused that to do that. So now that is pulled out, Dad was able to catch it because it was actually making an indentation in the marking compound. Don't even know where that came from. But you can see right there, multiple turns through this, nothing going on. That's pretty crazy. So Dad was not happy with the depth of engagement between the pinion and the ring gear here. The pinion and the ring gear. And so what we ended up doing, pulled the pinion support out here, took out a 10,000th shim right there that was in there, and then put this thing back together. And now he's rechecking the pattern at this depth. And something that me and him were talking about off camera, if we change that pinion depth, that is going to change the backlash. So we'll have to reset the backlash at this point. It might still fall in, but we got to check it and make sure that's good. So that'll be the next thing we do. If he's happy with the pattern, we'll check well, he's about to put the indicator back on here so that we can check backlash again, make sure it's good, and then we can check the pattern, and then that'll be. This is what you do, back and forth to kind of get it all set how you want. So Dad is pretty happy with the pattern that he's seeing here. The reason he's taking such, and he was explaining to me off camera, I should have got him to do it on camera. He was explaining to me why he's taking so much time to like check this and make sure everything's good. Even more than normal is that this is a used ring gear and pinion. And basically, since these have been run together, they've kind of been mated to each other, right? They've run, and actually the two gears, the surfaces are mated to each other. They need to line back up as closely as possible back to how they were running before we took this gear out, as they can be, because you want to try and make sure that those two surfaces, the two gears, are happy together. They're going to mesh right back together how they need to be. But basically, with this, he is pretty happy with what he's seeing here. There's a little bit of sharp edge on the teeth on this gear, and so he's been like thinking about it. but kind of the final decision here on what we're going to do. We're going to take and strain the gear oil that was in it. If there's anything in it, then that'll make the final decision on if we decide to change this gear or run it for now. We think it's probably going to, we're probably just going to run it, but like I said, this will at least kind of tell us what's going on.
Well,
It's not going to filter it at all.
That's what I figured. I asked your mom, so you reckon your oil?
It's not letting it drop through it. Alright, in case you guys were wondering, coffee filter will not strain gear oil.
Maybe.
Maybe. Maybe not. This week on Shift Points, how not to strain gear oil.
You can't strain gear oil.
Alright, success. After that stuff finally settled through that cloth, no shavings at all in it, so this gear is going back in the truck. We're going to use it. Yeah, so we'll just kind of keep doing that. But now Dad is going to throw a little more pattern compound on it, just double check the pattern, make sure it's good. I think we have to check backlash again. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and get the thing set up. Next time you see it, we'll probably be getting ready to put it in the truck. Alright, had to make a quick trip up to the Napa store, picked up a Fel-Pro gasket for the axle housing. It's a 55074 Fel-Pro gasket. That will go up onto the center section. We'll put some of this black RTV Permatex gasket maker on it, put it on each side of the gasket. The other thing we picked up was some of this Lucas heavy duty. This is ADW90 gear oil. It says it's good for use in limited slip differentials, so we think that's good, but on top of that we're also going to put some of this Lube Guard limited slip differential additive into it. We actually need 2 of these to go in there, or 1 and some. The reason for that, you remember last week we talked about it, said on there, it said wheel chatter. If you don't put this limited slip differential additive into it, you'll get that chatter where the clutches grab and then they pop loose like Dad described it last week. So that's the plan now. Got the center section up here in the vise. I'm gonna get the gasket on and then we'll be ready to set it up, get it bolted up, and then we can go ahead and get our gear oil and everything in there. Alright guys, that's going to wrap us up for this week. Getting that center section in took a little bit more, a little longer than I expected it to. So this is going to end up being a 3-part deal. But I think you guys want to tune in for part 3. I think it's going to be pretty good. We get this thing back together. We got to test to make sure it's going to turn over both the tires. So if you guys don't care to join us next week, we'll go ahead and finish getting the axles put back in this thing, brakes put back on it, and then we will be ready to actually take it out and try it out, try out our slapper bars, try out all of the improvements that we've done over the past few weeks. So we really appreciate you guys joining us. Please hit subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It helps us out a whole lot. And make sure to follow us on social media as well. Guys, that social media following and all of that really helps us be able to prove to different people that we're kind of worthy of working with them. And that's what we're trying to do, is get to a point where we can work with different companies and we can do some pretty interesting stuff and we can show off products and things like that to you guys that's going out there, because there's just so much good stuff going on out in the automotive industry right now. So we really appreciate everybody that's done that, that's followed along, likes, comments, and does all that stuff. Every week, if you watch one of our videos and you've got something you want to tell us about, or you know, something that you, a way that you've learned of doing something that's maybe a little different than how we do it, let us know. We're always looking for things like that. We're always looking to try and make things easier and better on ourselves and for everybody else. So appreciate everybody that's done that, following along, doing all the things, liking, following. We appreciate you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.